Hello everyone. My name is Santeri. I'm from Helsinki XR Center, as Tatu mentioned. And hopefully you can see my slides.
At least here it's perfectly visible.
Excellent. So let's start up with some metaverse semantics. First of all, quickly about myself. I'm the research and development lead at Helsinki XR Center, also working as technology expert at Metropolia University of Applied Sciences, and then sometimes as the expert reviewer for Horizon Europe applications. I studied interactive technology at University of Tampere, and I've been researching and developing metaverse technologies for about 13 years. I'm currently on the board of directors of XR for Europe and advisory board for the Finnish National Metaverse Strategy Group, and also participating in several other networks. So, definitions, why should we discuss them? Couple of stats from different countries. In the UK, 41% of citizens have no understanding whatsoever of metaverse. And in the US, 62% don't understand the purpose of the metaverse. So maybe we should try and fix that. Also, I've seen that the mainstream media is very confused about the subject. Like Tom Fisk said, we haven't pinned down the ending of what we are building towards. And the lack of direction seeds negativity, which of course means more views for the press. So, semantics. If someone doesn't know, semantics concerns how meaning is constructed and conveyed through signs, words, phrases, or sentences. So, something about meaning. So, what is metaverse? I think if you've been watching anything today, you've heard that question a couple of times already, and most likely the answer has been similar. So we started in '92 with Neil Stephenson and Snow Crash, and there they described metaverse as the convergence of physical, augmented, and virtual reality in a shared online space. Sounds pretty cool. But where does that all come from? So let's start with a little bit of etymology. The word metaverse is a blend of words meta and universe. Meta, the prefix originates from Greek, the same word meta, which means after or beyond in Greek. And in English, currently it's used to mean more comprehensive or transcending something. It can also be used self-referentially about something to create this kind of theoretical consideration of properties of something on a higher level of abstraction. For example, we can study meta-mathematics, which means studying mathematics itself by using mathematical theories and models. Or if you want an easier example, we could have metagaming, which is the use of information outside of the gaming world that a game character normally wouldn't have, but that we can use for our advantage. The other side, the universe, comes from Latin, from the word universus, which means combined into one. And in English, currently, it generally means all of space and time and the contents of them, or everything that exists. So from those, we can kind of draw the conclusion that metaverse could mean transcending everything that exists, which sounds like a pretty good idea. Well, let's talk about language for a moment. Like Herman Narula said in his book Virtual Society, essential part of high-level thinking is the creation of models of reality. And a virtual world is a sort of model of reality. But how can we create that model? It's with language. Like Wittgenstein mentioned, the limits of language mean the limits of my world. So the more words we can use to describe something, the bigger the world in our imagination grows. And as Levi Strauss mentioned, when this language takes off, so basically gets known by multiple people, this imagination in someone's mind, it becomes socially constructed reality. Multiple people understand the same imaginary world with the same language, and they agree to it. So that creates a new meaning to the language describing this imaginary world. It becomes kind of reality, or even a bit more than reality, as with language we can describe things that don't exist. So in a sense, it transcends reality and becomes meta-reality. But these kind of ancient imaginary worlds, they are pretty static. There's always someone who tells a story and creates the imaginary world, and then it kind of stays the same, as you always have to tell a new story to figure out a new world. Like Narula again mentioned, the Christian concept of heaven and saints is the quintessential virtual world. We have the church describing this world of heaven and saints, and that's pretty static. We can't really change that. It's up to the priests and the Pope to make changes if necessary. But what's interesting in there is that when we create this imaginary world, it starts to affect reality. For example, we could have these saints protecting the crops or protecting the sailors or anything else people believe them to do. And this faith makes the saints real, makes the imaginary world real, and it starts affecting the reality of the people. Well, if we compare this to virtual worlds of today, they are not static anymore. They are changing all the time, and the users are actually changing the virtual world. They are still creating new meaning, new values, and the virtual world is still affecting the reality. But now we can all affect it, all create new meaning all the time. And because of this, we can think of Metaverse as a conversation. It's multiple worlds, whether real or virtual, which allow for exchange of information and value between them. Or as Jared Berman said, Metaverse offers a space for introspection, exploration, and collective understanding. It enables individuals to reflect on the nature of their interactions, to question assumptions, and to challenge established norms. We can build something virtually that doesn't exist, but then it starts affecting the reality. So let's talk a bit about the modern Metaverse. I mentioned Snow Crash. There's several other novels, movies, TV shows describing Metaverse or similar virtual worlds. And for all of them, the real world in those fictionary tales, it's always horrible for the common people. They are bleak dystopias creating a backdrop to the idea of Metaverse. And Metaverse or virtual worlds, they always provide an escape from the grayness of the real world. They offer possibilities for fun interactions and meaningfulness to the lives of the people who enter them, something that they cannot do in the real world. And for many people currently, the experience and familiarity that they have with these virtual worlds, it comes from these fictional representations. This kind of different fictional media, they give mental models to the people about virtual worlds, but they also affect the language they describe them with. And these kind of fictional works, they are actually helpful for researchers, for example. They get new ideas. They encourage developers to do things that don't exist anymore. You might be watching a movie, seeing a really cool thing, and that's something that you then strive for the next couple of years to bring it to reality. But at the same time, they cause a lot of misconceptions between people who don't understand the reality. And people misunderstand what Metaverse is, what it does, and what it will be used for. Let's have a really brief history lesson in the middle to kind of see where we came from. Everything we can basically track down to the 1800s. We have the original stereoscope by Charles Whetstone, the first device that could create 3D images. Then moving 100 years on from there, we have the same idea by William Gruber in the Viewmaster in 39. And then finally in 52 by Morton Heilig, we have the Sensorama, which is basically the first device that could transport people to another realities. And at the same time, in the beginning of the 1930s, we have different fictional stories. Pygmalion Spectacles by Stanley Weinbaum, which was the first novel to introduce a device which was like VR goggles, something that you put on your head to see into other realities. And from there on, we're starting to head into the 60s with the coining of hypertext, hypermedia, and these ideas that will build the future of the metaverse. In 68, we see the first AR glasses, the Sword of Damocles by Ivan Sutherland, most likely named because of the huge contraption that is hanging on top of the user's head, which I wouldn't be sitting under. In 78, we actually see the first MUD, multi-user dungeon, made by Trapshaw and Bartle, to actually allow people to interact together in a virtual world. First through text, but in 86 we have Habitat, which allows people to interact visually as well. And this kind of interaction between people is becoming the important part of Metaverse. Of course, developing the World Wide Web in the 80s, that helps. And finally, then we get to the 90s with Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson. On the VR and AR side, there's some development in the 90s as well. Nintendo tried and failed with Virtual Boy. And we see Cybercode in 96, the first marker-based AR solution for mobile devices. In 98, we even see first kind of AR solutions in TV with NFL showing graphics of the yard lines in their TV shows. Then going into the 2000s, we have a lot of different virtual worlds, or you could say proto-metaverses, like Second Life started in 2003. We have World of Warcraft, Roblox, a lot of things starting then that are still going on today. Google Street View allowed people to actually go in anywhere in the world and seeing it for themselves. Then in 2012, we get to the kind of starting point of the latest generation of new technologies with the successful Kickstarter for Oculus Rift. Then we had Google joining in 2014. And 2015, we have Samsung, HTC, and a lot of other big companies creating their own devices. Microsoft joining in 2016. And all of these devices are building the new ways to interact with 3D data. Then we come to 2016 and Pokemon Go is released. Completely new way of interacting with your environment. Everyone is playing it at some point. And we still haven't seen another as successful AR game as Pokemon was. In 2019, an important part of Metaverse, 5G networks are introduced to allow us to transfer more and more data even faster. And at the same time, we start to see more of these standalone devices like Oculus Quest. And then COVID hits. Everyone is forced to go remote. We start to see a lot of different online services popping up, and the development is continuing really fast. People still want to be together, but now they have to do that online. One of the big marks of 2020 was Travis Scott performing in Fortnite for 25 million people. And then, of course, after that, we saw Facebook rebranding as Meta. And lately, we have ChatGPT launched a lot of different AI services. Big players like Siemens and NVIDIA partnering to build the Metaverse for industrial companies. And at the end of 22, we had more than 20 million MetaQuest 2 sold, which was at that point clearly the market leader in VR devices. So that's kind of where we're coming from, and moving on to 23 and on to think about Metaverse and what that actually means. So let's talk about definitions for a moment. Originally, when I was looking at different definitions of Metaverse, my idea always was that there's a lot of them. They are very different. But even though they are using different language, the kind of idea behind them is very similar, as you can see from these examples that I have here. The second one, the convergence of virtually enhanced physical reality and physically persistent virtual space, fusion of those allowing users to experience it as either of them. That's from 2006, when the Metaverse Roadmap Summit was held. Also, the bottom one, the integrated network of 3D virtual worlds, constituting a compelling alternative realm for human sociocultural interaction. That sounds like something that could have been coined last year, but that's from 2013. So these things have been similar for 10, 15 years at least. Now there's just more people talking about them. Of course, we can do more detailed definitions like we have from Matthew Ball and the XR Safety Initiative, going into different characteristics like presence and persistence, interoperability. But they are still discussing the same things, connecting spaces and users and data together. And I think the last two are probably the important ones, as they take into account the temporal side. Metaverse is not something that is, but something that will be. There's an ideal that we want to reach, but we are not there yet. I kind of boiled it all down to this kind of definition, similar to the last ones. But something that I wanted to add that I think none of the other ones had is the network of ecosystems. Instead of just talking about network of virtual spaces, I think we should talk about ecosystems, like we have currently in these so-called proto-metaverses like Roblox or Minecraft or Fortnite or whatever. You have these ecosystems within themselves. And when we can connect these ecosystems to each other, then we are getting closer to the actual metaverse. I've been discussing these things within the European Commission quite a bit. They've had a lot of workshops on the subject, and they plan to release an initiative on the subject, and then they did. But it's not on Metaverse. It's initiative on virtual worlds and Web 4.0. And overnight, Metaverse became a term non grata in EU. They still have definitions for virtual worlds and Web 4.0, which are pretty similar to the ones that I showed you just on the last couple of slides. But the words are different. And when you ask them, why is it so? Why can't we talk about Metaverse? To them, it was an obvious political choice. Well, it's not obvious to me, but I think Meta's influence over the term Metaverse is stifling the broader discussion of the future of the term. Like the media outlets were promoting, Metaverse is already dead, we have to do something else. Or that's the view of the European Commission. But by restricting the use of terminology, are we actually moving into this mindset of Orwellian newspeak and reducing the use of terms because of politics? We are eliminating the inherent ambiguity and nuance in discussion by reducing the terminology to simpler constructions with really strictly defined meanings. Like Yosuke Matsuda mentioned, we shouldn't define Metaverse so rigidly that it actually limits the imagination of the creators. There should be some room to maneuver within the definition. And by creating new terminology all the time, we're just making it really impossible for the normal citizens to actually understand what's going on. If we have new terms every year, no one can follow them. I think there's also some other issues with the definitions of Metaverse that we could look into. Of course, virtual worlds are an integral part of the Metaverse, but that often leads to misconception that Metaverse is only for games and entertainment, as virtual worlds usually have been connected to gaming. But that's totally incorrect. There's so much more that you can do within Metaverse than just games. Then we have this discussion or I don't know, competition between Web3 and Metaverse, and how both of them are described as the next iteration of internet. I think the question here is that which comes first? Somewhere we have a definition for Web3, and then below that as one component we have Metaverse. Like Blockchain Council says on their website that Metaverse technology is a core feature of Web3. I'll go into the technology a bit later, but I think it's the other way around. We can have Metaverse without the Web3 technologies. But Web3 technologies can be integrated into Metaverse, bringing them under the umbrella of Metaverse. Then the next problem or issue is 3D. Is Metaverse always in 3D? Of course, the idea of having the spatial aspect of the environment is really important, connecting virtual environments which are usually in 3D to each other, allowing people to move within the space. But that's just one option. We could just as well have 2D applications for Metaverse. Like if we look at the Axie Infinity, one of the very popular blockchain-based Metaverse games at the moment, it's fully 2D. So that's still Metaverse, but if it's not 3D, shouldn't we include it? And the same can be said about the devices. Usually when we discuss Metaverse, we think about virtual reality glasses or augmented reality. But we could just as well have a 2D screen in front of us through which we interact with the metaverse. Whether it's a PC or a mobile phone, that will be the most common device to enter the metaverse for several years from now. So it doesn't have to be 3D all the time. Then lately, we've heard this discussion about replacing metaverse with something else. Robert Scoble mentioned that we should start using the term Metaverse 2.0, even though we don't really have the 1.0 yet. And I think that makes absolutely no sense. If you've seen the articles related to that, all of the new additions to Metaverse 2.0 are something that are already included in the first one. So we shouldn't name things randomly just because we don't want to use the old term. And I guess the biggest question here is that when is Metaverse? Is it here now? Are we still waiting for something to happen? Bybit made a study that there are 400 million unique monthly users in the metaverse, and 51% of those are 13 and under. Okay. I think if we look at the definitions, that's kind of the ideal metaverse, and we are not there yet. But if we include all of these so-called proto-metaverses, which are mostly on the gaming side, then I can clearly see the number. And in that sense, we have some parts of the metaverse here. But the ideal big one complete metaverse, it's maybe somewhere in the future. So how can we actually reach that? Let's look at some of the technologies that are included in the metaverse. I really like John Radoff's onion model of the metaverse, going from the infrastructure all the way to the top to experience. But in this presentation, I think I'll concentrate on the innermost 4 parts, roughly, talking about the actual technologies. So what's needed to build a future? First of all, we need some way to visualize and use data. Maybe extended reality, maybe some other display techniques, large screens, cave systems, something that we can display information on. Then I'm using this term spatial computing here to kind of describe all of the embodied actions that the users can do. Instead of using mouse and keyboard, we use our body to do interactions, something that mimics reality. And to this, we need new technologies like motion capture solutions or haptic solutions to actually get the feedback to our body instead of just through regular channels on the screen. Then when we have the ways to interact and display something to kind of connect the metaverse, the virtual to the real, we need some way to reconstruct the reality. And that's happening through different reconstruction techniques, whether it's mobile phones, taking photos of small objects, creating 3D models out of them, or having a drone flying around the city, doing laser scanning of the whole city. Some ways of doing 3D reconstruction to actually build a virtual model, a digital twin of reality. And when we have that model, then we also need the data from the real world. And that's happening through different IoT connections. We already have a lot of sensors everywhere. There's data collected from pretty much everything. And with IoT solutions, we can connect that data to the virtual spaces, interact with it in virtual space. Then, of course, AI. It's been a big topic the last year, and that's a key part of Metaverse as well. With AI, we can actually analyze the data automatically. We can create conversational agents, generative tools to actually allow us to interact and create more easily in the Metaverse. Like in the beginning, I mentioned that Metaverse is a conversation. At some point, we can create that new meaning with conversation. Then we have the Web3 technologies, blockchains, NFTs, which can be used if we need to decentralize and secure the digital content. And lastly, since we have a lot more data, a lot of accurate 3D models, AI, we need a lot of processing power. We need good networks. And for that, 5G, 6G networks and edge processing will be important tools in the future to actually allow anyone to use these technologies with any kind of devices. And of course, there are a lot of other fields of technologies like microelectronics, photonics, better batteries for standalone devices, neurotech, robotics, wearables, whatever you name it. A combination of these will create a Metaverse experience. They don't have to include all of them, but picking the ones that are needed for each experience. In 22, we saw the Gartner's hype cycle for emerging tech, which had Metaverse on the upslope, going towards the peak of inflated expectations. And it's marked with an orange triangle, which means that it takes more than 10 years to actually reach the plateau of productivity. And at least on the upslope part, I think we accelerated that pretty fast. We went up and now we are coming down. The hype is quieting down quite a bit. We now have the next big thing that everyone is hyped about. But I think that allows the companies that are working on Metaverse solutions to actually get to the productivity part a bit faster. So, what is Metaverse today? If you go talk to a company creating Metaverse services, you ask them that, I'd like to buy a Metaverse, please. What will you get? I think this is Metaverse. This is probably Metaverse as well. This is definitely Metaverse. And yeah, I think that's Metaverse as well. And yeah, this too. And yeah, that's big part of Metaverse. So in the end, when everything is Metaverse, nothing is. And as such, I think talking about the Metaverse, we should only debate that in a kind of philosophical sense. If we want to talk actual applications or solutions, we should be more specific, talking about the content, the technologies, the platforms that we are using. No one is selling you Metaverse. They just create an application that uses Metaverse technologies. At some point in the far future, these technologies might converge towards a singular Metaverse, but that's not today. And no single application or platform is the Metaverse. So let me ask you again, what is Metaverse? I think a good idea is thinking of Metaverse as a third place, which according to Oldenburg is a location where people spend time between home and work, and where people exchange ideas, have a good time, and build relationships. John Radoff drew this similarity between traditional third places like pubs and shopping malls or sports centers to Metaverse, as similar activities occur in both. And I think this is really relevant as similar comparisons were made in the early 2000s in MMORPGs like World of Warcraft or EverQuest or Lineage, discussing how they were really fit for the formation of bridging and bonding social capital and acted as similar third places as the ones in real world. But as I mentioned before, work is a big part of Metaverse, especially currently when a lot of the solutions are B2B solutions. So it's not purely a third place. So maybe Metaverse is a second and a half place. I started with Neil Stephenson, so I think it's only fitting to end with Neil Stephenson as well. But this time a different novel called Anathem, and like in that book, I think we could think of Metaverse as this highly theoric world where the ideal Metaverse described by the definitions is this higher plane of existence with perfect theoretical models which we aim towards, but we can actually never reach them. We can only ever create more accurate approximations moving upwards on the stream of different existences towards that ideal Metaverse that is somewhere far behind us. And similarly to Stevenson's description, these less perfect proto-metaverses that have been far down the river, they are struggling to move back upstream to the next causal domain, aiming for a more perfect version of themselves to bring them closer to the ideal Metaverse. And as we move towards the future of Metaverse, we might be actually moving backwards through these collapses of quantum wave functions, avoiding the choices which move us further from the ideal Metaverse towards the unreachable, perfect Metaverse. Thank you. If you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you for that amazing session, Santeri. Personally enjoyed it very much. And to the audience, I just allowed microphones and cameras if anyone wants to open their mic and give their comment, your question, feel free. Also looking through the chat, there haven't been any written questions. Everyone was raptly listening to your talk, and it's no wonder. But it's a perfect time to ask Santeri something or give you a comment. So go ahead. Everyone's speechless. Well,
if you're interested, just feel free to reach me by email as well. It's on the second to last slide there. I'm happy to discuss the ideas further.
We have a question. Go ahead, Yevgenia.
Yeah, the question, do you see any risks in people running out from like real reality to virtual reality?
That's a good question. Sure, there are risks, but I would say there are risks in any kind of digital solutions. Like we have the same problems with bullying or hate speech than any other solution. Of course, with especially like virtual reality that you mentioned, there's some new problems that might occur. Like, for example, let's imagine that you're wearing the headset, you have marked your playing area within your apartment. It's safe, you don't bump into walls, but then someone hacks your device and they actually change the playing area. And after that, you're running through a window. And at that point, it might become really dangerous. But I haven't heard of that happening yet, but it's a possibility. But I don't see it as any more risky than any other digital games or other solutions. I think people walking in the street with their mobile phones out is a lot more dangerous.
And I think we're all familiar with that one by now. Thank you. That was a great question. Any others with questions or comments? Now's your time. Well, if there are no questions or comments, I would like to ask you to please give Santeri your feedback, as with all our other speakers. Speakers want to hear what you have on your mind and if you enjoyed the session. So I'm going to give you one more time the link for the feedback form. Just a second. Please do take a few minutes of your time. It's very valuable. Just tell Santeri how you felt about this session. As I said, personally, it was awesome. Helped ground the concept of the metaverse in a new way, and actually kind of opened eyes to how we've been heading towards this for a while now. Actually, it's not a new thing really. So, thank you, Santeri, very much for a great session. We hope to see you in future events if it's possible in the future.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was really fun.
Thank you.